Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say welcome to the very first episode of the Brew Podcast. My name is Mr. Cool Beans, and I want to thank every single one of you guys for coming out and checking out my episode. It's the first one. It's real special to me as I embark and put myself out there. When you do a podcast, you literally are putting your life out there for people to hear, and it is what it is because you have nothing to hide but everything to share. So, welcome again to the Brew Podcast. So I guess a lot of you guys are wondering why the name The Brew. Where did that originate from? Well, for me, I love a solid tea or coffee. And most of the time I like going to check out little small coffee shops or just little tea parlors, just kind of hanging out with a friend and just sitting across the table and we just conversing and sharing ideas. All of this is more conversational pieces and it's more therapeutic on my end. Hopefully it is for you, where we can just bounce ideas off of each other, share experiences, share how we're feeling, what's up, what's down, where do we feel like we're going from here. So the brew is just if you would just imagine just us chilling at a coffee shop, and it's not just us, it's everybody else who's listening too, right? So that is the brew and what it means to me. The purpose of this podcast for me is just to bring advocacy and awareness to chronic illnesses, more specifically CKD or kidney disease on my case. But it won't just stop there, of course. I plan on covering other topics such as men's health, mental health, and of course my health journey through my diagnoses. Diagnoses? Is that the word? Diagnoses? Anyway, my hopes for you guys, the listeners, I just honestly, I want you to take away whatever nuggets you find here. I hope through my experiences, you would get a deep insight of what it's like to be a normal human being, just overcoming unforeseen obstacles in their health. Sometimes it's not even your health. Sometimes it's just unforeseen circumstances in your life in general. We all, get a deck of cards or a hand of cards to play. And sometimes the most unexpected turns in life happen. So this is a good opportunity for us to kind of sit down and gain perspective, not just from me, because I also plan on bringing other folks on here too to kind of shed some light on some perspectives that we all can benefit from. So that's my hopes for you guys as we embark on this journey. But for all intents and purposes for today's episode, I'm planning on sharing just a few topics. Of course, I'm going to share some of my background, college, family life, maybe some hobbies, and then of course we're going to get into my journey, my health journey. This is all brand new, man. Trust me, I'm getting a kick out of this. I've been planning on this for a long time, and I'm glad that you're here with me. So let's jump right into it with the background. So first and foremost, my name is not on paper Mr. Cool Beans. My name is Mondestin Mondesir, or more Mo for short. I think a lot of people like calling me Mo because it's easy on the palate. I grew up in Miami, Florida. Two wonderful parents. Of course, my mom, she's not with me, but my dad is still kicking. He's rocking. I hang out with him every day. He's like my brother. Grew up in Miami. Miami is a beautiful place. I like it. Well, I remember the Miami in the 90s. But anywho, grew up in Miami, had a lot of friends, did the kid stuff, grew up. I ended up moving over to Orlando where I transitioned from Miami-Dade College to UCF and I studied education. I went to college and studied education, got my bachelor's degree in elementary education, studied history. And depending how you tell the story, I either moved from Miami to be with my current wife, to be with my wife now, or I just moved up to study. But it depends who tells the story, right? So I moved up here, got married to my beautiful wife. We do have a wonderful son, a wonderful toddler who thinks he's a T-Rex. And we love to travel. We love to check out sites. My wife is an avid nature person. She kind of morphed me into a nature lover. Me growing up in a big city, we didn't have a lot of parks and stuff. We had beaches. South Florida, if you consider it. But she made me a nature lover, and I love going for walks. I love biking. I love doing all that stuff now. Whereas before, I was just like, girl, we need just to chill in the house and just watch some Netflix, So she changed me. So, pretty much my family life in general. Again, we love to travel. Even when we're not traveling, we love hanging out with friends. We love game nights. We love potlucks. We love parties. Mind you, we're Caribbean. So a good bashment never goes bad for us. We love it. But, that's just us. That's just me in a nutshell. And then, of course, you have my journey. All right. So this is where we get into the thick of things. Okay. So my journey. And it can be a little bit complicated because when you think about it, it all starts off with your roots, right? Your family system. What kind of, medical history do you have going on? For me now, as I think about my parents both suffered from high blood pressure and diabetes. I, for whatever reason, am not a big sweet tooth person, but that doesn't mean from eating sweets you can just get diabetes. You can't get diabetes from anything else. For me now, I just never really liked sweets. So I think because of that, I cut my chances of getting diabetes by a lot. But I have to be mindful of all the things that probably could still get me diabetes if I'm not aware of it. So diabetes and high blood pressure does run in my family, but I did contract one of the two, being high blood pressure. Now, for me, high blood pressure has always been a nuance. Every time I would go to the doctor's office, like, hey man, you have high blood pressure. You need to get that under control. And I'm just like, all right, cool. I'll do with that. And for a long time, I actually thought high blood pressure was something because you just ate a lot of salt. And, that's part of it too. But there were some other attributing factors that brought on my high blood pressure. I can admit I was overweight, severely overweight. I think after I left Miami, moved up to college, and college life, there's always pizza around. Somebody's always drinking this, or, not alcohol per se, but just in general, you're going out late, you're hanging out, you're sleeping late, all the habits kind of go out of the window, and, you tend to like, wings more, and you start grubbing out a little bit more just because you're in college and you feel like you're invincible. And I think around that time, we could say like 2013 up until like 2018, and just wilding out in college, just trying to survive, crashing late nights, studying, stress, all of the things that come with beautiful college life, right? And so I can say that I put on a substantial amount of weight. And it showed, because when I would come back, I would leave Orlando and go back down home, the conversation was like, boy, Monderson, you really packed it on, man. And then, and that in turn kind of created a vicious cycle of anti-socialism, because I was subconscious about my weight all the time going back home, that people would say things and I knew, or even if they didn't say things, I knew they were talking about it, because I know when I left here, I wasn't like this. So that was bad in and of itself. And no harm, no foul to anybody, but I just knew for me, I was doing more damage to myself because I was ignorant to the fact that, hey, my eating habits have completely went out the window and my sleeping habits were just out of whack. And I probably didn't care because, hey, I'm trying to survive in college. So show me some grace, right? So yeah, I can recall all of that, and my wife, I love her. She's been with me through the most heaviest of moments, and she's kind of been cheering me on, and she's such a big supporter. So, okay, enough of chit chatting and jabber jabber. Let's get into the breakdown. So here's how I'm gonna do this. As far as my journey, I'm gonna try to give it a very detailed timeline. Not too much detail to where I'm just going on and giving you details. If you have questions, if you do have, anything you want to ask me, you can always feel free to ask me on my Instagram page, or you can DM me, or you can, comment on underneath the podcast, and I'll get back to you. All right. But I'm going to try to keep it very concise with a clear timeline of how things unrolled for me and where I am now. And then we're going to close off with how do I feel about all that has happened as of recent. All right, buckle up those seatbelts. Here we go. All right. So I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, like legit high blood pressure, back in 2018, like officially documented high blood pressure around 2017, 2018. I believe I was pre-hypertension. I got that from a doctor at the clinic at UCF. I think I had a headache at one point, and I went to the clinic on campus, and then the doctor who was there, or I guess he was a doctor, told me that I had pre-hypertension and I needed to be careful because it can get really bad with high blood pressure. And I said, okay, cool. And I walked away. I wanted to walk away because I didn't want to even hear anything about high blood pressure. Again, high blood pressure being a thing that run in my family. When you hear it, it's always like, oh, your blood pressure, that's the worst thing that could happen to you. And I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want to hear that. So I moved on and didn't do anything to address the high blood pressure or the pre-hypertension. So then come along in 2018, my blood pressure is kind of abnormal. We're talking like high elevated blood pressure, maybe around the zones of like 180 over 120. Like that's pretty high. And so I was put on a couple blood pressure medicines. I'm not going to call their names right now, but just know I was put on a couple blood pressure medicines. And, and then finding out that I was anemic at the same time, which kind of created a little vortex of complications because you need iron in your blood to kind of support the blood pressure and yada, yada, yada. But at that time, I didn't know any of that. And I don't think a lot of the doctors did a really good job, too, of addressing those things and explaining those things to me. One time I just got asked straight up, like, hey, are you vegan or are you vegetarian? Because your iron's low. You need to eat more, food that has, iron and yada yada yada. And so I just took that as a license for me to eat more meaty things, and not necessarily. Anywho, moving on. 2018, diagnosed with high blood pressure. Okay, so I've been taking the blood pressure meds, but I'm taking the blood pressure meds, but not doing anything lifestyle change worthy. Like I'm not walking yet. I'm not, bicycling yet. I might do a couple things because we lived in apartments that had a gym and I would probably get in there maybe 1 to 2 times a week, maybe 3 times. I'll give myself some credit, but it wasn't consistent enough to where I can say I did a complete lifestyle change. Yeah, we've even tried, doing the vegetarian thing a couple times, but it felt more fad-ish than actually a lifetime change. Or lifestyle change, rather. Sorry about that. So, anywho, that's 2018. Come 2021 now, I'm getting ready to be a dad. My wife is pregnant. Everything's all hunky-dory. Blood pressure's still here. And so, in the midst of me getting ready to, become a father, my wife and I head to the urgent care because all of a sudden now, I'm having chest pains. And, that 2021 year, that 2020-2021 year was, the shutdown with COVID. I go to the emergency room. They do a chest x-ray. And guess what I had? I contracted COVID pneumonia, the big one that was sending folks to ICU, the big one that was out here just slaughtering everybody left and right. It was the worst. So we ended up going to the ICU because doctor recommended that I head there. So I go to the ICU. Immediately they check me in. They do my x-rays. They confirm it, draw blood. They absolutely confirm it. My wife goes and she's like, all right, well, you're going to be taking care of it. I'm going to go grab some breakfast for you and come back. She asked the folks in the front, hey, can I come back? Like, yeah, absolutely. By the time she leaves and comes back with the breakfast, I'm already admitted in ICU and everything, and she could not see me. And she is literally about to burst. She's pregnant. And so can you imagine for me, 2 weeks being in a room, not being able to see anybody except for the nurse who was dressed like an astronaut. But great guy though. Great guy. Shout out to Akeem, Nurse Akeem. I'll never forget his name because I can say that was somebody who really took care of me. And so I'm diagnosed with COVID pneumonia, 2 weeks in the ICU. My wife water breaks while I'm in the ICU. She had her mentor from work, who was phenomenal, came to our house and everything, even asked my wife, hey, so your husband's in the hospital. How are you going to do when you have to give birth? My wife, we're the only ones up where we are living right now. All of our family is down in South Florida. And she says, she stepped up to the plate and said, hey, I'll be there for you. She even came in and slept in the other rooms that we had in our house, slept in the other room we had in our house and just kind of waited for that to happen. And when my wife's water broke, guess who was with her? Sue. Sue was right there with her, took her to the hospital and everything. And I get word of all of this. I'm literally on the 6th floor. My wife is on the maternity ward on the 3rd floor. So here I am, ICU, fighting for my life. 3 a.m. alarms, code blues, seeing corpses walk by covered up from the other rooms down the hall. I'm terrified. You can't even imagine what's going on through my mind because I want to be there for my wife, but I can't, right? So all that's happening, of course, long story short, I beat it. I'm here doing this podcast. My wife gives birth to a beautiful, lovely boy named Brian. I'm ecstatic. I'm watching him through a video call and I'm crying. She's crying. Everyone's crying. All the nurses in the hospital know who we are in our situation. And it was something to marvel at because I could have died, but I didn't. I just give thanks for that. So we get discharged the same day. They wanted to make sure we left the hospital at the same day, and we did. But here's the thing, though. After catching the COVID pneumonia and being cleared from the hospital that year of 2021, every year since then, I would catch pneumonia. So that means in 2022, the next year, I got pneumonia. 2023, I got pneumonia again. Now, here's the thing that happened in 2022. When I caught pneumonia then, the doctor, right before I got discharged, told me, hey, dude, look, you weighed 375. Now, mind you, my highest weight was like 389. I remember stepping on the scale one time, it was 389. But at that time, I was 375. And the doctor told me, hey, man, if you lose 10% of your body fat, the effects of pneumonia wouldn't be so bad on you and affecting your lungs. And I don't know what it was in that salad, he said, but I took whatever I found there. And when I left the hospital, I came home. I told my wife, hey, look, I got to make a change because I'm tired of this pneumonia stuff. And so literally that first week out of the hospital, I started eating only kale and spinach. Kale and spinach. Then I added mustard, kale, spinach, mustard. And that was my salad. And I would do that. And my wife would make fun of me like, what are you, OCD or something? Whatever. And then, I was so terrified of the fact that I almost died a couple times. I didn't want to die. And so I just kind of made that routine. And then I started going from the fear mongering part and just made it into why am I doing this? And it's because I wanted to be around. I'm a new father. I want to be here for my wife. I don't want her to raise a son because of my negligence of her health. Right. And so that became my why. And so I just continued to, I added protein. Protein came in the mix. I started eating more greens, started eating more fruits and vegetables. By this time I had eaten more fruits than I did my entire life. It became a staple. And it's not because I was following some diet. It was just the fact that I was making my health my priority. And so 2022, I went on this big weight loss journey. And for those of you who know me personally or have been following me on Instagram, I've made that publicly known and I'm not ashamed of where I started from. Like I said, my heaviest weight was 389 and I was able to climb down with the help of eating greens, bicycling, taking in protein. I climbed down around 125 pounds. So you imagine maybe around I got to about 275, 270, around there. So 389 to 275, that's a major climb. So I felt great. Clothes started getting looser. I started wearing, smaller sizes. It went from a 3X to an extra large. And I was just like, okay, I can do this. All right, we're doing it. But then again, 2023 came around and I thought all was gravy and I got pneumonia again and I ended up in the hospital and I said, oh boy, here we go. Same routine. They're going to draw blood. What was the big issue still? Blood pressure was still the problem, so they kept me a little bit longer. And so this time around, what's funny was they drew my blood. Of course, they're checking my blood pressure. They drew my blood into some abdominal scans and they found out that something was up my kidneys. The doctor came into the room and he told me, hey, look, dude, I don't know if you're aware of this, but your kidney function is pretty low. He told me that I was stage 4 kidney disease and that my GFR was operating at a 22%. And I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean stage 4 kidney disease? I think the only word that stuck with me was the word disease, like cancer or HIV or, like a disease. It's a disease. What am I going to do? I got a disease now. What do you mean I have a disease? What happened to all stage 1, 2, 3? Where is those? What would happen? And he just told me, hey, look, man, this is kind of crazy. You lost all this weight. It should have went the other direction, not backwards. What's really going on? And so I didn't have an answer to give him. So, they just continued to monitor my blood pressure. They, made sure that I was on a low sodium diet at the hospital. One of the nurses came to us and I was just so freaking out the whole time. She said, hey man, you might want to check with a nephrologist. First time I'm hearing that word, nephrologist, didn't know what it meant. Then I found out that it's specifically a kidney doctor. I said, okay, I got to go check that out. So my wife, again, great woman. She goes out, she checks out a whole bunch of nephrologists. Actually, I did meet a nephrologist at the hospital, but I wasn't feeling the vibe. I really wasn't feeling the vibe at all. I felt more so it was going to be another, hey man, take this pill. I'll see you in 2 weeks to take your money again. I really had a bad relationship with doctors because I really didn't see doctors going above and beyond for their patients. It was more so just, hey, come in. Who are you? No eye contact. All right, come back 2 weeks. Take these meds. And I was sick of that. I wanted a doctor that I could really talk to, that I could really, connect with. And I didn't feel that from that doctor. So when my wife goes out now, she checks with a nephrologist who was recommended by our primary care at the time. She got connected, and soon as I plugged into his office, he started coming through with the educational lesson. Hey, this is your kidney. Your kidney has nephrons. Nephrons filter. And I said, hey, look, man, look, I've been doing my research. I've been doing all this stuff. My kidneys are failing. I'm finding out that, it's my high blood pressure. I need help. I know the rigmarole. Help me out here. And so when he saw that I was in desperate need, he just completely shifted gears with the education stuff and went straight to med management. He said, all right, look, I got you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to manage your blood pressure because right now your blood pressure is completely out of control. It's like 230 over like one, just high. All right. We're going to manage your blood pressure and we're going to biopsy your left kidney. And so he gets all of that set up. I mean, he actually gets me a room at the hospital before I even get out the parking lot of his office. He tells me which hospital to go. I get there. They already have my name pulled up. I get into the room. They already have me on med management. He's telling them what meds to switch out. This is what he needs to take now. And immediately I see and feel my blood pressure drop. Blood pressure just come crashing down. And even when my blood pressure would spike up a little bit and they'll give me a different medicine, I would see this doctor came in on a Saturday morning to check in on me. I wake up and here he is standing over my bed. I'm like, wait, isn't your office closed? But he said, you're my patient. I'm going to come see you at this hospital. And so when he saw that they gave me a certain med, he went back out to the nurse and was like, hey, what are you doing? I told him to give him this, don't give him this medicine. And that's the first time I saw a doctor really go to bat for his patient. It was the most, forgive my lack of, my lack of words, but for lack of a better word, it was beautiful. All right. It was beautiful. I don't care. It was beautiful. He really came in and went to bat for me. So as far as the biopsy goes, they kind of stalled it because, my blood pressure was still in the works of coming down a little bit, but they did the biopsy around that weekend. And then in the middle of the week, the doctor told me, the nephrologist told me, hey, look, I need you to go to Tampa General. I got some friends over at the Moffitt Institute that they want to check out your blood and your DNA to kind of see what's going on with the blood pressure situation so they can assess if you have something called atypical HUS, which can cause extreme high blood pressure in certain people, and you might need a medication to take for life to address that issue. So let's go ahead and rule out everything. So this guy gets me plugged in with Tampa General. Same deal. I get there, they already know who I am. I mean, this Dr. Hayes, shout out to you, man. He really goes to bat for me, and he gets me connected with Tampa General. I mean, the Moffitt Institute comes in, they shake my hand, they get to know me, they start running tests, they draw blood, they do all of that stuff. Dr. Laper. I mean, these guys are phenomenal. They work so fast. Anywho, all of this happens between December 2023 and January. All of these things happen. I get my kidney biopsies, blood pressure is being managed. I'm seeing the Moffitt Institute. So I'm at the hospital in Tampa waiting to see the urology department that's going to come and kind of figure out what's going on with my kidneys and whatnot. So the nephrology department says, hey, look, urology is not here yet. You can either go home or you can stay here at the hospital over the weekend and see them Monday morning. And this is a Friday. And I say, you know what? Let me talk to my wife and we'll come up with a decision. We'll let you know. And so the guys walk out the room. Immediately, I had a question. I said, hey, look, I forgot to ask you this. And as soon as I go to call them, I feel something like a gunshot to my left side of my abdomen, and my kidney ruptured. My kidney ruptured from complications from the biopsy. I literally was bleeding out. I was bleeding all the way out on the inside, but I didn't know. I thought I was super constipated because, when you're constipated, it's painful. You feel backed up. I even got to the point where I was throwing up and I didn't feel good because I felt like, man, I need a poop. Can somebody do a colonoscopy and just drain me out? I was asking for laxatives, but nothing was coming out. Matter of fact, I was doing more damage because the laxatives were building up. It was building up some sludge inside of me and it couldn't pass through because there was something going on my left side. And I didn't know it was my kidney that ruptured. So 16 hours of that, taking the pain medication to kind of keep me cool and falling asleep. The doctor finally came in and he said, you know what, let's do an abdominal x-ray and a CAT scan to see what is going on with your abdomen because this seems unnatural. This doesn't seem right. After we're done, come back to the room after they're doing the scans. The doctor comes back with some x-rays and a chart. He says, hey, I got some good news for you. And I'm over here like, all right, are we going to do this colonoscopy to clean me out, man? Just kind of, wring everything out of me. He said, no, man. Matter of fact, you're bleeding on the inside. My left side had swelled up quite a bit. And I'm thinking it's because, I'm just completely backed up. My body's just swelled up now. And all of that was blood. He pulled up the x-rays on the screen. He shows me this gray clouded area on my right side of my abdomen. And he said, all that is blood. He said, at the rate that the blood that you're bleeding in 2 hours, if we don't get you into surgery in the next 2 hours, you might not be here anymore. That sent me into a frenzy. He put me in surgery stat. They got me cleaned up. They got me wiped down and everything. And they just dragged me into the operation room, put me to sleep. Now, the operation was supposed to last maybe around 2.5, 3 hours. It ended up being 4 hours because where the rupture site happened was so high up in the kidneys that they only could save only a portion of the kidney. Matter of fact, it was only the bottom portion of the kidney that was receiving some kind of blood supply, while the top portion was abnormally receiving blood supply. So pretty much it's like less than half a kidney was still on my left side. And at the same time, my right kidney, oh my gosh, my right kidney had a mass. My right kidney had a mass inside of it. And also it was storing up, it was holding on to urine. Pretty much I was septic because there was a blockage somewhere in my mid-pole to my ureter. And we'll address that later on. So they literally had to get me back into operation the next day and plug in a renal stent. And now I'm flushing out fluids. By then, my legs just swelled up because of all of the fluid that was backed up inside of me. My GFR had dropped from that 22. Well, it actually went up to 24 again. But then it ended up dropping from the blood loss, from, just all of that stuff happening, the trauma. It dropped all the way down to 11. I was stage 5 at that time. I mean, the doctors made a promise to me. They're going to do everything to keep me off of dialysis. I'm too young. I'm a dad, all of these things. And they saw the fear in my eyes because it's the first time I feel like, COVID was one thing, but this right here, I literally thought death was coming. And the great doctors at Tampa General still kept me alive, and I'm so appreciative of that. So big ups to Tampa General. If you guys are out there listening, big ups to you guys. They gave me some iron. They gave me a whole heap of iron, a lot of blood transfusion, get me back up. My GFR by the time I was discharged climbed up from 11 to 15 to 17 to 19 at discharge. So I was out. I came out the hospital seeing the world differently. But now the right kidney with this mass, they really wanted to address that mass because at this point, they're not sure what it was. They did all types of MRIs without contrast because my kidneys are so damaged that they didn't want to, risk using contrast and creating more problems for my kidneys. So they did without contrast, but they never could really identify what that mass was. So to take all precautions, they hooked me up with the transplant department. Heidi Pearson, great doctor. She hooked me up with a unilateral AV fistula in my right arm. And if my folks in dialysis, you know what a fistula is. But a fistula is literally a vein. It could be a cow vein, it could be a pig vein, or just your own native vein that they use to kind of create an artery in your arm. So that way when they do dialysis, the vein won't collapse, because if they do dialysis on a regular vein, that vein will collapse. So they have to take a vein and create a fistula or an artery so that it can take the pressure of the pulling out of blood and restoring the blood, if you catch my drift. So Heidi Pearson did my fistula for me. And at the same time, because my GFR was so low, they plugged me into the kidney transplant class, or the course to potentially be a kidney candidate in the future, which is super great. Tampa General has been so proactive, along with the USF Urology. In my health, they played such an integral part, especially with Dr. Hayes and his connections as well. Like, I will say this, your care team, no matter what health journey you're in, matters. Your care team matters, okay? If you have a doctor and you're not feeling the vibes with him, find a doctor that you can connect with and you can trust with your eyes closed, because that's going to play a big part when it comes to your health and how you approach wellness. So, got the fistula in. This is in April 2024. So now I'm meeting up with USF Urology in May. They're thinking about doing a partial nephrectomy, which is removing portion of the kidney, or seeing what it is first to see if they need to remove it or not, if it's benign or malignant. And so Dr. Trushar Patel, he meets with me, we talk, and he says, hey, look, man, you've been through so much surgery. Your body's been through so much trauma right now. At this point, I've probably been through like 4 or 5 surgeries. And he's like, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. Because if I go and do the surgery now, you will be on dialysis. Let's wait till your GFR kind of goes up a bit. And then we can talk about doing the surgery because it's going to take away 25% of your GFR, this partial nephrectomy. He said, so we're going to go ahead and give you some time to recuperate. We'll do some stent swaps because every 3 to 6 months, or every 3 months, I swap out my stent in my right kidney. He said, we're going to do a couple of those and then we'll come back to the table and we'll talk about this partial nephrectomy. Cool. This is in May, June, July, August, September. I swapped the stent. October, we meet. Well, we meet up in October, early October. Or no matter of fact, early September, we meet up. We meet up at his office. We talk. I tell him, yes, I want to go through with it, because he was like, it's my choice if I want to do it or not. I said, yes, let's go through with it. And so we set up a date for October 18th. October 18th, 2024, we do the partial nephrectomy surgery. Guys, it was completely robotic, the coolest thing ever. But I will tell you, that operation was no picnic. Again, an operation that probably should have been like 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, became something around 5 to 6 hour surgery. I mean, I was out, because it's a really small area. They got to, put the arms of the robot into your skin, make a whole bunch of incisions, and then they got to make the slit to get into. I mean, these areas are so small. They got to be very delicate, and it's all robotic. So they do the surgery successfully. I come out in recovery. Dr. Patel tells me, hey, man, I think we got it. It was a clean cut, no mess, no residue, nothing. We're going to check out this tumor and see what it is. And now we went from just being a mass to a tumor, and maybe they're one and the same. But for me, I saw an elevated naming of this thing that just been sitting in my kidney. So that kind of made me raise an eyebrow. And I told my wife, I think it was a cancer. I think it's a cancer. I really believe there was a cancer. 2 weeks later, after the partial nephrectomy procedure, pathology report comes out, and it is a stage 1 renal cell carcinoma, grade 3, with negative margins. So full-blown cancer with negative margins sitting in my right kidney the whole time. Now, mind you, if they went ahead and biopsied that right kidney and that mass got nicked, that cancer probably would have burst. And what else is flowing in the kidney? A whole bunch of blood. And if that would have happened, the blood would have been so infected with the cancer, it would have been all over my body. So thank goodness that never happened. Now that I found out that I had stage 1 cancer, I'm stage 4 chronic kidney disease with a malignant hypertension. All of these things kind of came floating around my head. And I'm just like, what am I going to do? Like, what? All of these things happened right when all I wanted to do was lose weight. And all of these things just kind of came out of the blue. But it's all good, though, because I'm thankful all of these things happened. If they didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have learned how to appreciate my body and my organs and just my life in general. So now what's the plan? I'm doing genetics testing to make sure that I am not, at risk of any other cancers. Urology department are also planning on doing some reconstructive surgery on my ureter because they found that some parts of my ureter are twisted and that kind of keeps the urine from going straight into my bladder. It's like kind of pushing back up. So that's in the works. And just getting ready, transplant department, kidney transplant department's checking to see if I'm in need for preemptive transplant with a new kidney because I'm literally operating off of 3/4 of a kidney because I don't even know if my left kidney is back online. So, in closing, how do I view all of the things that has happened? Again, like I said, honestly, I'm super thankful that all of these things happened because had they not happened, I probably would not have learned how great life really is. I probably would have been taking it for granted still because I wasn't really thinking about health. I was just trying to, just do my thing, trying to live life, trying to be normal, what have you. But it happened. Sometimes I do cry. I think a lot of times I underestimate the mental health side of things because that does come up a lot. Especially when you think about the trauma of all the things that happened. 2024 was a real stressful year. I mean, hospital visits after hospital visits, specialist appointments, people calling to check on me, times where I didn't feel too good, the fatigue, I can't do everything that I usually do. I got to be mindful of certain things. And so, guys, I say all of this to say this podcast is going to chronicleize a great journey for me as I grow into health and just figuring out life. So, this is just the first of many episodes to come. I plan on having so many other folks come on here and chime in and give their perspective on things. It's going to be great. Again, this is just in closing. I want to thank you for listening to my first episode. It's a little bit brushed in, but I just want to say follow me on Instagram at Mr. Cool Beans, MrCoolBeans 2889 on Instagram. Guys, this is going to be great. And thank you for coming into my life. We're going to have fun. I appreciate you guys for listening. Have a great day. Peace.